Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here in a couple minutes, but thank you so much for getting up nice and early on a Monday morning and joining me. If you, like always, if you want to pop into the comments and say hi, that's awesome. If you want to kind of mention where you're from, that's greatly appreciated. It's always nice to see where everyone's coming from. So thank you so much for joining me again. This is like my 15th live stream over the last month. So I've been doing this for a month now, and I think this is going to be my last week. So I think today and Wednesday morning are going to be my last live stream. I'm going to kind of shift into something a little bit different, and I'll make an announcement about that at some other time. But today I wanted to kind of go back to something that I talked about before, that we worked on before, and that's writing in the journal, because I feel like I've spent a lot of time focusing on the art part, the art techniques, and to me the writing is almost as important, because really for me the visual journal is that mix between words and images. And so I want to go back. I want to do a technique that I mentioned whenever I was talking about writing, but I also want to kind of mention and talk about where my ideas come from, because I feel like I've given a lot of good information about, getting things started, kind of maybe starting to develop pages, but I kind of want to maybe go into a little bit more about where I get my ideas, and most of my ideas come from the writing, or come from as I'm working in the journal. So it's kind of hard in this sort of stop and start, kind of live streams, to really kind of get into that flow that I get into whenever I just sit down and work. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about the writing, and as I do, I'll talk about kind of where I get my ideas, and then I'll show you this writing technique. And it's something that I find is very useful at the beginning parts of a page, the beginning stages. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my work surface. So I've got my journal, and this is the same journal that I've been working in. That's Stillman and Byrne. It's an Epsilon series, 5.5 by 8.5 inch mixed media book. It's got relatively thin paper, but it's a good quality mixed media paper. So my ideas come from, like I said, from a lot of the writing, and I do a lot of reflective writing. And before I get into that, materials, in case you want to grab materials and work along, you need some kind of water-soluble material. I'm just going to turn back to my handy-dandy Inktense pencils, kind of, one of my favorite materials, but it's going to be really great for this page. One thing is, you probably want to have something that's like a medium to a light value. If you have something really dark, like a black or a real dark water-soluble graphite, that might not work so well. Other things that work really well are just like water-based markers. So if you've got a pack of Crayola markers or whatever, something that's going to bleed when we paint over it. So I have that. I have my other Inktense off on the side. I've got a brush, and I've got my water cup up here if you wanted to use watercolor paint with it as well. So you could use any of those techniques that I've shared already with the water-soluble materials. So I have a page that I think this is where I'm going to do my writing. And like I was saying, whenever I start to develop ideas, they sort of come in the process of working. And it's kind of weird that this says in the process of, but the theme of this book, or ideas in this book, came about. I started this back in March down in North Carolina, but I was doing writing, and the word unfold kept coming up. So this actually is in the process of unfolding, and that came about because of writing. And so I stenciled the words in, and some of that writing is on the tracing paper that kind of goes through. But then this idea of unfolding also is leading into this notion of discovering, and it wraps around. And then I started linking that word discovering with the notion of just direction. So discovering direction, That kind of led me to this notion of finding my way, because whenever you're discovering direction, I think you're finding your way. So that's kind of where my themes come from. It comes from the writing. It comes from things that are on my mind. So everything in here. So whenever I first talked about writing, I was talking about the big ideas, and I started off with 5. So if you missed that episode, you can always go back and watch it. But these were my 5 big ones: place, identity, memory, connection, and solitude. Wonder and journey came up as I was writing as my operative words. But those 5 are pretty typical, what I start from a lot. But since I've been doing this a long time, ideas come from things that pop up. And here lately, there have been some words that have been coming up a lot, ideas that have been coming up a lot in my work, and one of them is story. So this notion of everyone has a story. I've been reading a lot of Brene Brown. Even almost everything that I've been reading or seeing lately has been talking about this idea of your story and trying to own your story. Well, the only way you can own your story is if you know what your story is. And so I think that's kind of where that notion of unfolding came from, is that unfolding to me really is about finding out who you are and figuring things out. So owning your story. And so that's going to be my kind of big idea, my prompt, story. And I encourage you that if you want to go ahead and write along with me, use that as your prompt, that notion of story or my story. But it's just something that I've seen it almost everywhere that I've been reading, podcasts I've been listening to. This notion of story has been coming up a lot. So coming back to this page, now I do have like a little window there that opens up on this photocopy of me, but I don't really worry about that, so I'm just going to keep that there. So I've got my pencil. Now, typically whenever I do this writing, this is a stream of consciousness writing. It's the same technique that I've used a lot, and I teach it a lot because I think it's something that's very valuable. Some people call it free writing. Some people have like very strict rules. So my rule about it is that it's like my head is connected to my hand, and I'm just going to write, and I'm going to keep writing, and the idea is that I'm not going to stop. And the notion is that I'm going to fill this page. A lot of times I'll have a timer on, and that's how we did it back that was weeks ago that we did that. And so I'm just going to write and fill this page, and I'm going to start off with that idea of story. And as I write, I'm not going to try to edit myself. I'm not going to stop and think, oh, what do I want to write next? It's as if my brain is connected to my hand, and I just keep writing. I don't worry about spelling, grammar, or punctuation. I just keep writing until I get to the bottom. And if I'm timing it, I just keep writing until the timer goes off. Okay, so I'm just going to fill this side. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll write over the whole thing, but I think I'm just going to write on this page. So I encourage you to pick up a pencil, water-soluble pencil, graphite, or even, like I said, marker is great. Kind of work along, and probably take 5, 6, 7 minutes for me to go through this. But I'm going to go ahead and do it, and then I'll talk about sort of what comes next after I get done with that. So I'm going to go quiet, so it's not that I'm not talking. I'm just going to start writing. All right. So the idea of story. Okay, so you might still be writing. That's fine. You can keep writing, or if you want to stop and kind of listen. So I filled up this page. It's not really important that I can read it all super well. But what I might want to do first, it's kind of hit or miss if I want to do this. I might take something like one of my Faber-Castell pens, something that's waterproof, and I might want to go through and highlight my operative words. So operative words are those key words that we want to pick out, things that come up in the writing that have some meat to them, that have something. Now, I'm not going to pick the word story, which is right here, because that was the prompt I've already started with. So I already have that as a prompt. But some of the other words that came up, and I want to just go through, maybe pick 3 or 4 or 5 different ones and highlight them. And so, this notion of trauma came up in some of the writing. So I'm gonna just taking the pen, because what's going to happen is I'm going to paint over this, and those words might totally disappear, and I might forget exactly what they were. So just take a few moments, finish writing if you haven't, and then look over your words and see if there's any that stand out that you're like, oh, I want to highlight that, I want to bring that. So I just write over it so that it doesn't get washed away. Okay, so once I'm done, then I highlighted 5 words. Those 5 words are going to stay. They might smear a little bit because the ink sometimes does blend. Okay, something's weird's happening with my computer. So is there anybody experiencing any difficulties? Just, I know sometimes sometimes it's nothing. But it looks like things have frozen on my end, but just want to make sure. So if it's still live feeding and everything's fine, I just want to make sure that it is actually feeding, because sometimes with this, the weird stuff happens. So give me a moment. Sorry if this is live. Oh, looks like it's back. Okay. So anyway, so now that I have this written, what I want to do, I have my words highlighted. I want to go ahead and I want to take my paintbrush and just some plain water, and I am going to brush over it. So this might seem kind of counterintuitive because, you spend all that time writing, but what I like is that the water-soluble material spreads, and so you get this kind of painterly effect. And this is really nice because I know sometimes we write stuff, we're like, oh, I don't want anybody to see it. And so this is a great way to start to obscure it. And it just kind of starts to create this interesting kind of background going on. And you can see that ink, that black indie ink from those Faber-Castell pens, doesn't really go anywhere. But I could really scrub this water-soluble material and it might go completely away. So if you're using something like a water-soluble pen or water-soluble markers, sometimes the words will completely disappear, and you're just kind of left with this like mottled background. And so if there's anything that I don't really want to read, I could really scrub it. Just be careful because sometimes the paper will start to come apart. I'm starting to see little dark dots, and that's actually the paper coming up. So I don't want to scrub too much with this. But as you can see now that it's very very light now. It's harder to read. The words that I highlighted are easier to read. They stand out more. But I am going to dry this with my hair dryer, so I'm going to turn down the volume so I don't break any eardrums. So now it's nice and dry. I can do something with these words if I want to. So I can kind of make this a little bit more visual. And then maybe there's even some other words that I want to highlight. So that's something to kind of think about. Let me pull out a blue pen. Um, so one of the things that I like to do is I like to highlight these words even more. So I'll take my pen and I want to go back over and maybe make these words just a little bit thicker. So I'm using a thicker pen. Okay, so it's kind of highlighted them a little bit more. I'm going to take my blue pen and kind of go over, make a oval or a rectangle, just go around it. Kind of make sure I have a lot of ink down, maybe go over it twice. And this is just a way to really highlight it, make it more visual, more graphic, make it stand out more. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn up my mic. So basically, what I was saying, if you couldn't hear me, was I took a thicker pen and I went over the words, and then now I'm taking a blue pen and and just outlining it. See, I was so worried about breaking your eardrums that I forgot to turn the mic back on. Well, turn it up anyway. Anyway, so what I'm doing is I have blue down around, really kind of highlight those words, and then I'm going to make it a little bit more visual. I'm going to take my yellow marker. Should have grabbed this beforehand. So I've used this before. This is the same marker that I've used with the water-soluble materials. If I take the marker, I'm going to fill in, I'm going to color in. What's going to happen is, even though the ink is water proof, because I'm doing this pretty quickly, what happens is sometimes the blue ink doesn't quite have enough time to dry completely, and the yellow marker picks it up, and then it just sort of blends it in. And same thing with the black. The black kind of just smudges and smears a little bit. So this is just a way that I can take those few big ideas, those few operative words, and really make them stand out even more. And so then they become part of the page as I build more layers on top. And so you can really see how they pop out now. They stand out now. So it's kind of it's kind of I don't know. Just I like how that looks. And if I wanted to, I could pull out more and use a different material. So I'll go back to this page that I've shown before. So this is a page I did the same thing. I used a different water-soluble pencil. So I used kind of an orange pencil, I think, or a red. And I used the word hope was my prompt, and I wrote it out. And instead of using the marker, the yellow marker and the regular pen, I used silver marker, I think a silver Sharpie. And then I took a black pen and traced around it. And so what happens is this really is the beginning of a page, but I have these kind of 5 bigger ideas that are kind of popping out, and I've started adding some watercolor to it and started doing some of the ink. So anyway, so I just wanted to kind of show you that technique because it's one of my favorites. It's a great way to get something started on a page, but it really leads to me to that discussion about how do I come up with my ideas. And so, you know, as I start to build layers, so using all those techniques that I've mentioned before about, you know, drawing random lines and random shapes and building up with the watercolor pencil and using collage, those things build. And so as I kind of go back, if I go back to the beginning, I mean, this page is really starting to feel resolved. And if I move through, like, I really like the way like this page is feeling. I'm thinking maybe a tape transfer or something up here just to kind of give it a focal point, but this is really starting to be more resolved, and I went and really did a lot of the colored pencil around to really embellish and kind of finish that off. I was doing more of my web, which I found out that this actually has a name. The web kind of stuff is called neurography. Like neurons, like your brain cells, because it looks very cellular, like things are connected cellular. Sorry, I can't speak this morning. Anyway, so this is feeling really finished. This one, maybe not so much, but this is. I really worked a lot on this. And so this is just all those techniques that I shared building up one on top of another. So again, the ideas that kind of generate come from generating, you know, the writing and kind of doing some things. So just kind of wanted to share that. So, you know, the pages back here are very, very incomplete still because I just haven't layered as much on top of them. So if you've been following along and you've been feeling if you've been following along and you've been feeling like you know, you're just kind of starting stuff and you don't have a lot kind of built up, just go back and keep using those same techniques over and over again. And that's kind of like what I do, and I just build it up, and the ideas come from the writing, but they also just comes from working. So as I'm working on a page, my thoughts start to flow, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need to write this down, or oh, that would be a great theme for this page. And then I might go, oh, I need to go get some collage and glue that down, or oh, I need to write the words or stencil the words. There's a whole lot that you can do to build up the layers and to build up the meaning in the book. So anyway, just kind of wanted to share that with you. And then here at the end, I just wanted to tell you the reason, if you weren't here at the very beginning of the live feed, I was saying that this week is probably going to be my last week of the live feeds, partly because it's been over a month. And so I think this is my 15th one, and I don't want to give away all my secrets, even though I've given away most of them. But I'm going to focus my energy on doing an online workshop, and that's something that is going to be like a live thing through Zoom. And so it's not going to be like recorded and then you download it. It's going to be, you're going to meet. So I'm thinking Wednesdays at like 1 p.m. something like that. So and besides, it seems like my internet today is having some issues. So I think this is kind of something that's going to keep getting worse as more and more people are on the internet, more and more people are doing online stuff. It seems like with Zoom, there's not as much issue as it seems like with the live streaming. I don't know, but anyway, if you miss any part of this live stream, I'll put it up on YouTube, because I record it locally and then it'll be up there. But like I was saying, be on the lookout for a Zoom thing. So anyway, looks like the connection is going in and out, so I'm just going to sign off now. And yeah, thanks for tuning in today. Sorry for the technical difficulties.